Hey y'all, it's Monica. I don't know if you're feeling the same way I am right now, but I cannot listen to the news anymore at all. It's just a constant stream of warmongering propaganda, no matter what channel you're on. I just can't listen to it. So I was thinking that I am not the only one, and maybe we all want to just talk about other news or at least try to stay abreast of some of the other news. So that's what I'm here for. I think I want to talk about some headlines from today. I'm still trying to catch up with the news from my news hiatus. So this is just stuff that's happening today. I don't know if I have any deep thoughts on it, but I'd like your comments if you want to comment also. Okay. So first thing though, I know this is funny because it's like I'm not talking about Gaza, but this is not what people are talking about on the news. Hat tip to Dean, who tweeted me last night. So he was already on this, even though it's getting some a tiny bit of airtime today. What he tweeted at me was, these are not the usual suspects, something like that. And what it is these protests outside the DNC. And what is being said is they're pro-Palestinian protests and they were violent. And if you watch the clips, they're scary. Like people are getting angry and whatever. But if you actually read down to the bottom of the articles, these are Israelis and Jews who are for a ceasefire. So to describe them as pro-Palestinian isn't exactly realistic. And they're saying that they were absolutely peaceful, like candlelight vigil type stuff, and that the cops got super aggressive on them. Now, there was a pro-Israel rally on the Mall. This was in DC in front of the DNC, the Democrat National Convention headquarters or whatever. And the article I read on CNN said this incident comes 2 days after what is believed to have been the largest pro-Israel gathering in the United States on the National Mall, with congressional leaders from both parties, including Chuck Schumer and the new speaker, Mike Johnson, found common ground at the rally. This was much smaller, and there were a couple of congressmen inside who were evacuated. But what these people are saying, it says early Wednesday, today's Thursday, a group organized by Jewish Voice for Peace Action. Now, I remember Jewish Voice for Peace and Gush Shalom were Israelis or Jews who were talking about this issue, like the peace. They want to have a solution to the dispute between Palestine and Israel. So they're part of this. The If Not Now movement is part of it, and the Democratic Socialists of America. They held a candlelight vigil near Capitol Hill, and they did this protest, I guess, outside the DNC. There's a quote from Beth Miller, the political director of Jewish Voice for Peace Action. She said in a statement Wednesday night that hundreds of peaceful anti-war activists came to the DNC to call for an end to bombs and violence in order to save Palestinian and Israeli lives. That's a good, they say they're pro-Palestinian, but when I had that conversation with Gregory Harms, he was saying the same thing. It's like the Israelis aren't benefiting from this. They were met with brutal assaults by the police, Miller went on to say. The Democrats need to decide, will they stand on the side of peace and justice, or will they continue to support war and genocide? Ava Borgwart, If Not Now's national spokesperson, said in a statement, instead of heeding our call for a ceasefire, police violently attacked nonviolent protesters with pepper spray. So I went to the Jewish Voice for Peace Action website because I had not ever been there before. And one of the things that they're working on is that they were one of the groups that was ousted from the Columbia campus, and they're trying to get reinstated there. And I think that's interesting because I did not, in any reference I heard to that, nobody ever said it was a Jewish group that had all this anti-Semitic stuff that the Columbia was getting pressure about or complaining about. So here's the thing. So what I've noticed in this round, and I'm sure others have also, hold on, I'm going to read Angus's comment. The DC pro-Israel gathering in DC was filled with every politician that's either dual citizen of the US and Israel or paid for by Israel. They're not concerned about our country, only Israel. You're talking about the protest that was well received and well attended the day or a couple of days before. So this is a very different thing, which is why Dean said these are not the usual suspects, because they're not even the Palestinians. So one thing about what I've noticed about this event is that of all the times before, I've never seen so much airtime given to the Palestinians or the Arabs, whatever. And I think there's a lot going on there. I mentioned it last time. I think they're really trying to foment this clash of civilizations. But I also think when the US is like, we have to come up with a solution, I feel like they're going to. That, like, the way they took Roe versus Wade out and they just changed the narrative and they actually leveled up because of that. It might be a paradigm shifting moment here where they're going to give Gaza and the West Bank, more likely Gaza, but some autonomy. But of course, it'll just be controlled by the Western powers and they'll do whatever. But it might just, maybe it'll be an extension of the outpost. Maybe it'll be another Jordan or something, But I do feel like there's something different about this. However, you're never hearing Israelis on that side. So part of this being highly divisive is definitely true. So they're off script, they're outside their silo. They do not get airtime for that. And they must actually be put down for that, because what is not wanted in these dialectics is people being on the same side. That's what I always said about Anthony McLean, the black guy who was shot running away from his friend's traffic stop in Pasadena, shot twice in the back. And then they said he had a gun, which was really mangled and weird. And there was no real investigation. And I said, the reason you hear about George Floyd and not Anthony McLean is that the Anthony McLean is so cut and dried. It's so crystal clear what happened that nobody would say it was okay that the cops shot this guy twice in the back. And they don't want people getting scared. They don't care about the issues. So I thought that was interesting. Sergei Lavrov, who is, when you hear competent people, it's just such a joy, like smart people. I'm not saying I like him or not like him, he's a good guy or a bad guy, but Sergei Lavrov, like, he just tells it like it is. But anyway, he came out and said that he is calling for, obviously, there's no solution but a two-state solution. I think that's probably right. And I think that's the way it would go. And I think there's a chance of that happening. It's a very powerful rift, a very powerful source of division. But I do think that there's a chance that we're looking at on the precipice of a paradigm shift. All right. So another thing, and this happened in my backyard, is, well, not my actual backyard, but in my neck of the woods, there's this, it's not that big a deal. And it's the story's a few days old, but there's a big fire under the freeway here in LA. And of course, I'm always just totally skeptical when a fire is supposedly bringing down things made of concrete and steel. I mean, call me crazy, but this is a new trend of something that's physically impossible. And they're just going with it. So of course I'm skeptical. They're like, there are 2 pallet farms lit on fire at the same time. And that was the first story. And I was like, this is complete nonsense. Plus, people are super paranoid about fire out here. And that is a really, really busy place. A small fire, I think, would get a lot of attention. But in any case, there were tons of pallets under both sides of this intersection. I think it was Lawrence and East 10th, or I don't know what it was. I-10 and Olympic, or I don't remember. Anyway, but it's a very, very important place. And so they immediately announced that it would take 3 to 5 weeks to fix it. The I-10 is going to be closed. And something about that is, so I just dug in a little bit. They're now saying it was absolutely arson. It would not have, you could flick a cigarette and it would light that fire. And actually, people do not flick their cigarettes out here, in my observation and experience when I lived here last time and was a smoker. But the piece of property underneath the highways there, I don't think that's true everywhere, but there is owned by Caltrans, so the government. And it was rented out to people who were supposed to not have anything under there that was flammable. But let me see if I can somehow translate this picture that I saw of what it looked like. It was March 2022. It's just piled high with just garbage and everything else. So So I think that stuff's all fishy. I think there are always a few agenda at work when it comes to stuff like that. The it's okay. So this is a quote, or this is a quote from the newspaper article. It's the 10 freeway is a major artery in Los Angeles and the region. Around 300,000 people would normally drive that stretch of the freeway every day, Mayor Karen Bass said. And employers were asked to have staff members work remotely. So obviously, to me, I see that. I think digital city, 15-minute city, what lockdown, one of the many agenda items for lockdown, they want people to work from home. They, I think another agenda might be just general infrastructure change. I don't know what they're ushering in, but whenever I see some kind of massive destruction, I think they want a change. Like 9/11, Notre Dame, they want to change something that they're not allowed to, or they don't have the money for, or whatever. And we know that our infrastructure is going to be greenized or whatever. And I actually saw an article in the air traffic about the air traffic control today as well, which reminded me of that. Like the Inflation Reduction Act, I believe, is the one that has all this stuff in it. They have a lot of money for these green transitions, infrastructure transitions, including air travel. So they want to have electric planes, which are definitely going to have some accidents, unlike the system now, which is my example of why the idea that government is incompetent is a canard, because they do run the FAA quite well. Or I should say, all we care about is the safety. And now they're saying, oh, it's not safe. We have to redo it. And yes, they should have whatever it takes to like continue to keep it safe. But I have a feeling that is also cover for spending money to make it to usher in these green flights, but I believe those will have a shorter range. I think this is also part of the kind of the era of mass movement, constant global mass movement may be coming to an end. They want you to work from home. They want you to fly not too far from home. I think that may be part of what's going on here. And I think Bass, the mayor, also said something about we don't know who caused the fire, but don't blame the unhoused. The unhoused, that maybe it's near Skid Row, I don't know, but which is like a really rough place here. But there are also movements for tiny homes, and a lot of policy, a lot of spending comes from the homeless crisis. So that's why they don't solve that. And I think this may, every opportunity to big snaps to an agenda they'll take. But speaking of Skid Row, I remember when my daughter was in school, I think high school, if not grammar school, they went with, I think grammar school, because she was in Catholic school. They went with a priest to like serve the people on Skid Row. And it was shocking. A couple of things that school did was like March for Life when they were like second and third grade against abortion. I was like, did you explain to my kids like why people would be pregnant if they didn't pray for a baby? Like I told them. So the kids were just like, "Oh, mom, do you know what this abortion is?" I was like, "It's too soon." So anyway, but they went to Skid Row, and it's very rough down there. But speaking of priests in LA, somebody asked me to like address the Bishop Strickland thing, and I didn't really know anything about it. But on Saturday, Bishop Strickland from Texas was relieved of his duties from his archdiocese. So he's no longer the head of his archdiocese. This was by Pope Francis, but and I think it was attributed to no like absolute reason was attributed, but the pundits and whatever the Catholic press were saying that it was because he criticized Pope Francis on not wanting the Latin Mass. But I don't think that I called my mother and I said, "Oh, what do you think of Bishop Strickland?" And she said, "What do you mean? What do you mean? He's a saint." I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "Why? What happened?" And I said, "Well, he got kind of whatever, like taken out of his position as the head of the diocese." She said, when did this happen? I said, Saturday. Saturday. So she said what she was saying was that they invited him, I guess, up here. There were I forget when this thing happened at Dodger Stadium a while back, not too long ago. It was some pride event. Pride must have been June. And it wasn't just a pride event. It was super, super offensive to, as my mother said, they were dressed as nuns and stuff and they were carrying on. They were carrying on. So they asked Strickland to come and lead the march. So he did. And that's why she thinks that he was taken out. And that may be true. That may be when he started going off. What else did she say? Uh, well, O'Malley and McKeever sold the Dodgers, so it's different ownership, Lasorda and stuff. They were all Catholics. So I don't know now. I don't know. Okay. She also said hot sports opinions, but I think this is generally accepted because even in my totally don't pay attention to that stuff world, I heard this that Cardinal Pell was told because I said, "Do you think they set up Strickland because that got him fired?" And she said, "Well, Cardinal Pell was totally set up." So she said nobody ever defended Cardinal Pell. He went to jail. I think this is Australia. Maybe our friend Stella can opine. And he just wrote a book. She says he's a saint, really. And she went on to say that when they are punished for criticizing. She said they're not criticizing. And I understand that. Like there are some things that you're allowed to, hate the sin, love the sinner. Like that's a real distinction. And I understand it. She said they're not criticizing. They don't understand what maybe they do some criticize, but for her, she just doesn't understand what the Holy Father is thinking about the Latin Mass. And she's no fool. She doesn't think Papa Frank doesn't drink baby's blood or whatever, but you're supposed to love and pray for the Pope or whatever. So she does. And then there was that other rights life priest, Frank Pavone, I think, who was ousted. He was the head of Priests for Life for many years. She loves him too. Anyway, that's my little aside of Catholicism and California. Is there another California thing here? No. Okay. So, all right. The big for me, because I love, Sarah from Ireland is liking my bookshelf. I really wanted for you to just do one book at a time, but I had a couple of hours. I didn't get nearly through them in a couple of hours, but I did have to just do it all at once. Thank you. So, okay. So let me talk about the economy. The stock market's been rallying and people are talking about this soft landing, that there's a possibility that inflation has backed off enough that they're not going to have a recession, even though they've been raising rates. And that's unheard of. It's actually so unheard of that in the entire history of the Fed, there's never been a soft landing where you cut rates dramatically and you don't get a recession. So, or whatever, you raise rates and don't get a recession at some point. And of course, my answer is if it's never worked, that was the reason the Fed said they needed to exist, was because they wanted to smooth the business cycles, but they actually create the business cycles. So, and they've never smoothed them. And you could argue they were worse in the 19th century, but I don't think they lasted as long. So the 1920 correction was nowhere near as bad as the 1929 correction, which lasted 10 years. Anyway. So, the consensus is right now, the consensus has changed. At first, people were worried about a recession, and now the consensus among economists surveyed by the Wall Street Journal or whatever, I'm not saying it means anything, but they're saying that there isn't going to be a recession. I really don't know. But I will say this. I was speaking with Jason Purcell recently. We've done this really long series on just money. And the most recent one, which was about de-dollarization and CBDC, he was expecting a mild recession. And I asked him, and a correction in the tech labor market. And I asked, my comment was, in my mind, lockdown was the recession. They had the end of an expansion. They had 2% interest rates. There was nothing they could do about it. They crashed the economy, and that was the recession. And why that would matter was in my theory, which I'm not only rusty, but I was probably never really very good at economic theory anyway. I mean, that was my concentration as an undergraduate, but I whatever. You can't really be great at that stuff unless you just immerse yourself in it for a long time. So but my thought was this, like, if recessions clear out inventory and reduce headcount and give people time to digest their overconsumption and everything, that should have been what COVID did. And as I was formulating this notion, I was like, well, it's not a soft landing because the Fed's getting better at their business. It's a soft landing because we just made up stories about what just happened. But one of the adjacent articles was about Target saying that its profits are up even though spending is down. So if you have profits that are up, you're not in a like a debt crisis. Like Target doesn't need to go borrow money like 3 times the amount of debt they have to pay off. They're making money. So that kind of thing lends the possibility to not having a recession. And they said the reason was they had total control over their inventory and employment. And I think they said also employment, but definitely inventory. And that in part was that they took that time, which I think people do during a recession, to revamp, but it used up inventory. Remember all the supply chain problems, which I thought were rather contrived as well. So I also think not necessarily Target, although it should be like somewhat counter-cyclical because it's cheaper. So if stuff is super inflated, you're going to go to where it's cheaper. But I also think those supply chain issues favored stores like TJ Maxx, where you don't go looking for a particular thing. You just buy what's there, kind of like communist Russia. So I've been wondering about the TJ Maxxization of retail, and everything else would be online. So another reason I think they might not need a total recession crash thing is a thing I read about Carlos Slim, might even be on his Wikipedia page. They asked him how he got so rich. Like, my opinion was that he acquired a government monopoly on telecom. When you've got a monopoly on something like telecom, it's pretty lucrative. That was in Mexico. But what he said was his father taught him basically buy low and sell high. But what he said was wait for the crashes and buy then. Make sure you always have dry powder for that. And I remember Event 201 announced that there would be a 40% correction. And I was like, it's coming, but I didn't have dry powder, whatever. But maybe if the Carlos Slims of the world got what they needed out of the correction, then they don't need to orchestrate another correction. I'm not 100% sure how totally controlled it all is. I don't know how much of these things do have to like kind of blow up their own steam, but to the extent it's controlled, I think a lot of that stuff has been worked through the system. However, they keep saying, but if there's an energy shock or whatever, the EU and UK both had declining inflation because it is said they had declining energy prices. So yes, that's a good thing. However, it does show how vulnerable these numbers are to shocks like that. So if you have anything that's going to interrupt oil, like violence around Russia or violence in the Middle East, so then so there's a lot of uncertainty there. And I don't know if you want to hear some numbers. I'm going to rattle off like 5 numbers. Just hold on. It won't take long. The 10-year treasury is 4.5% right now. The Fed rate is 5.3%. I had thought at a bare minimum, they had to get that rate up to 5%, maybe even 7%. So when now these guys are saying, oh, we think maybe there'll be a cut in rates in May, that may be true. But I just, then how are they going to, I just feel like they can only really, I don't know. Maybe they will, but I feel like rates are really still historically not that crazy high. I could be wrong. Anyway, the inflation rate is supposedly 3.2% with the target at 2%. So they're saying, you're going to need to cool off still a little bit more. Average hourly wages are up only 4% on the year, whereas I think inflation on the year was higher than that. So that's a nominal raise, but a real kind of decline. And the unemployment rate is at 3.9%, which is slightly up. And they are saying that's actually a leading indicator. So when unemployment starts going up, you might want to expect a recession. But these are uncharted territory. I have a funny poem. Have you heard this one before? It's my poem. Roses are red, violets are blue. Taxation is theft. Inflation is too. Because it is. Because when they inflate, you get less. I think this is all a result 20 years in the making of the tech bubble bursting. That's what I think is happening right now. We are paying for it, and we are paying for it by having the same amount of dollars and having to pay twice as much for peanut butter, or having 4% more dollars and paying 8% more for peanut butter. So, okay. Speaking of labor, there's all this labor unrest. It really bothers me because it seemed very artificial. It was happening when it really shouldn't have. It started when people were still reeling from not being able to go to work because of COVID. It was before the inflation started. There just wasn't really that much of a reason for it. Like, I just feel like unionized labor isn't even a real driving force anymore. Trump tried to bring manufacturing back here, which makes it more interesting, I guess, but I never really got it. I want to talk to Anthony Raimondo about it because he's a labor expert. But what's happening right now is the auto workers are having big strikes, or they had some strikes, and they're negotiating this contract. Ford and Stellantis, which I will still call Chrysler, are close to, they're voting on it, but it looks like their deal's going to go through. GM, they're taking a little longer, but it looks like they are going to go through. It's a similar thing. 25% wage increase. I think that's over a couple of years, plus cost of living adjustments tied to inflation. So that's high. I doubt you get cost of living inflation adjustments. That's kind of high. If it's actually tied to inflation. Company contributions to retirement plans of up to 10%. I don't know if that's 10% of your salary, which is a nice bonus. Regardless, maybe they deserve it, maybe they don't. But the auto companies are saying if you do that, Tesla and Toyota and places that aren't unionized are going to have a huge advantage over us price-wise in the final product, which I believe. And what I noticed was, I don't know if you've ever heard me talk about my friends with the blueberry farm up in Oregon. Beautiful, beautiful, big farm. It's more than just blueberries, but they were totally certified for organic blueberries, which is really hard to get. But they are within the county of Portland, or the city of Portland, whatever. So they were having to pay workers $15 an hour, which just does not support the price of blueberries at all. So they had to rent out to automated, like, potato chip farmers or something. Those who farm potato chips. Whatever. You know what I mean? Anyway, so I was at Whole Foods and I'm on an organic blueberry kick because supposedly they are truly, truly good for your eyes. My sister was starting to get an eye problem and she just mega dosed on organic blueberries. And it started to go backwards. And I think my husband attributes this little piece of information to Howard Stern, that you only need a half a cup. You do not need an entire pint every day. So I was looking at organic blueberries, and the ones that I was looking at, I think they were organic from Peru. And I was thinking, these guys are in Oregon. The dad's a truck driver. Like, he could literally truck them down. They are shipped from Peru. I mean, that's just outsourcing that labor. That's just exploiting. That law that Portland passed is just for anything that doesn't have to be done in Portland, like hotel service or something, they're outsourcing. And what these prices are going to do, to get back to the UAW story, is push the companies, especially auto manufacturers, into automation. But my theory is a little deeper, that the automakers and the labor leaders are in cahoots because, of course, the automakers want to go into automation. And I remember this story. I wonder if I told this story already. I hope I didn't tell this story on the air before. I mean, maybe before, but like recently, is that my grandfather used to say, my dad told me that my grandfather predicted that the stevedores, the dock workers, would negotiate themselves out of a career. And it was true. So they were really drove a hard bargain in the 30s. And uh, in the 50s, I actually wrote it down because it's such an impressive invention. A guy, snap. Someone invented Malcolm McLean invented the shipping container and literally changed the world. One of the most important inventions of all time. But where it like goes from truck to ship and everything, it really like could be the source of, 90% of our standard of living right now. But in order to bring that in, a lot of infrastructure had to be changed, standardization all around the world, which it was. And I would argue, I suspect that that was because the labor costs were so high. So in 1950, there were 100,000 full-time dock workers in the US. By 2003, there were only 10,000. And I think it was probably even more than that from the 30s, because what my grandfather was saying was 95% of all shipping went through the United States. It was just like the clearinghouse for everything. And they really worked themselves out of an industry. And I always wondered if the union leaders were in cahoots. And ends up, then I saw this guy, Sean Fain, which sounds so much like Sinn Fein. Oh my gosh, is Sarah still here? Stella, I knew you would like my potato chip growing analogy. Chickens and potato chips. So I don't know if Sarah's still here, but the IRA political party is called, I think it's pronounced Sinn Fein, and it's just like this, which were historically like, you associate that with terrorists. So this guy said that they squeezed every penny out of the companies, and he was wearing a shirt that says "Eat the Rich." And I just feel like you have to be stupid to think that you're going to get away with that when all they really have to do is not hire any more people. Now, I think some of these contracts have a little bit of like you have to hire people in there, but a lot of people on Twitter were totally saying this too on my feed. Like, yes, definitely. This is obviously a plot, an anti-labor plot. Anyway, but I started really getting into that with the railroads. Like they had a really good deal going. The union had negotiated a great contract and they didn't take it. I just, I'm like, you're just making an excuse to completely automate everything. I mean, they had legitimate gripes, but you have to realize, a business is a business. And if it's too hard, like that's why industries change. If it's not worth it, it's not worth it. You have to understand that you don't get to set the terms of what price clears for something. Oh, and I'll tell you another reason why I smelled a rat is that I remember hearing like some Ivy League chick I, met once, twice, just tangentially someone I was aware of. Smart chick. I was like, found out she was working at a fast food restaurant. And I was like, really? Like, I actually think welfare is probably making more than working at a fast food restaurant. That's really weird, I just didn't think much more about it, but all right, Samson, really? Meh. So I didn't think much more about it, but then a little while later, I saw that she was one of the leaders of some grassroots, like cashiers, trying to unionize this food chain. And I was like, really? Interesting. So yes, I did find that was interesting. And now what I will find is interesting is let's see. That's Samson. He definitely wants food. So let's keep the comment section short. Can you please give me a minute? All right, let's do the comments. So what is going on? So here's the thing. If you want to make comments, if you want to say something, I'm going to go through every single solitary comment. But because we've already passed through the stories, you might have to go back and say like regarding this, regarding that. So Angus JC, hi guys. The housingly challenged, that was pretty funny. Media Bear, Sarah. Okay. Monica, it would be fun, Angus is saying, to do a simultaneous podcast with you, deep dives, and Event Horizon like a point counterpoint. Okay. Uh, the only Event Horizon I know is the movie. Is your show called Event Horizon, Angus? I think it might be. So, yeah, no, let's definitely do it. I'm happy to do it. Okay. Tucking bathing suits. Target had a banner year tucking bathing suits. I don't know what that means. All right. Hobbs says apparently Israel's debt to GDP is only 60%. Seems like they could borrow for their war. I really want to know if Monica has come around on Glenn Greenwald. I I've never come around on someone where I'm like, gee, I thought that guy was suspicious, but now I don't. I've come around the other way where I'm like, oh, I totally gave that guy the benefit of the doubt and I was wrong. No, until Edward Snowden gets a new haircut, I will not believe any of that stuff. Like that guy is a cutout. I don't even know what cutout means, but he looks like a cutout. It looks like one of those uh cardboard things that is like a Santa at Target or whatever. Yes, so those Glenn Greenwald is in on the Edward Snowden psyop, and I just can't. Oh, Nate says 8.4 million people are working 2 jobs. That was a stat I meant to look up. How many people like are actually working? From what I understand, like only half the people even work. Only half the people work and half the people pay taxes, which means the other half of the people are taking that money. I mean, I know there are little kids. They're probably taking it too, unbeknownst to themselves. Old people, but I think there are plenty of able-bodied people who aren't working. That's fine with me. I'm happy to have people in the family unit. That would be better. I think half the people should work, but I think it was better when there was one head of household working, even if it's female. I mean, if you can do the job, that's fine at home or at work. But I like that idea of the head of household providing for the family because there's a lot of work to do at home, but it doesn't count except for out here. I don't know if it's everywhere. There's a thing called IHSS where I think it's everywhere. They want to pay you to take care of people. And it's annoying to me because we pay incredibly high taxes out here. They have like a total welfare state, total. So we are absolutely scrimping to make ends meet. Like I will not turn on the heat or the air conditioning unless I'm absolutely desperate. And I was never like that. I didn't care, but our mortgage rate's high, blah, blah, blah. So when I have to not work to deal with my son or whatever, it's tempting. I'm not going to do it, but mainly not just because it's like welfare, but mainly because it is so obviously it's such a disrespect to the nature of family. I don't blame people who are taking it because it's so hard to live out here. But it's such a disrespect to the nature of family because, love and support and trust. And, it would be nice if one person could support the entire family anyway. You pay more tax on interest when interest rates go up. Interesting. Kind of like the way when energy goes up, all the prices go up. So let's see. Okay. Hobbs says Monica's take on how the Fed has damaged the economy by encouraging malinvestment in home building actually blew my mind. Truly novel take. Thank you so much. I wonder where I went into that. The environment. Yes, yes. So I didn't remember that. Yes. The environment. I know that's what I've never heard anyone say that. An environmentalist, nothing. They subsidize infrastructure. They subsidize interest rates. They subsidize real estate building, particularly by making it tax deductible. And then we have overbuilding, and that's what's unsustainable. Things would be and the houses would be cuter and older. That's why I like love this house. It's just freaking old and has some character. Anyway, Nate has a potato chip tree. Nate says he's got a great potato chip tree in the backyard. That is very funny. CFR, are you gone? Yes. I wonder if he's still here. One of my English listeners. Gosh, it's so late there. This is CFR Network. We're going to do our year-end review before long. And I'm much better. I was super duper sick. I was super sick. I thought I had the worst case of food poisoning ever, but I was sick for like 2.5 weeks. So I think it was the bioweapon. Anyway, up. Are we gone? Is he gone? Yes, you love Samson. He's so cute. He is an old dog, though. Oh, tucking bathing suits for the lady men. I understand. Oh my gosh. He heard he heard us say his name. He heard me say his name. 100% with you on Snowden. He's awfully polished for a tech nerd. Talks like Clark Howard, like he has a real estate radio show or something. Yes, totally. And he never changes his look, which I think is so he can live a real life as a CIA agent or whatever, like a normal person. And because the CIA agents do very little things to like change their persona. I had so much to say about Edward Snowden over the years. It's getting hard to live everywhere in this country. Yes, 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 yes. JC says the welfare state reduces all the nuances of a loving and sacrificing family to an impersonal blank check. Exactly. It's really, really bothers me. The whole thing. Ugh. It was nice watching Thomas Massey clean John Kerry's clock on the environment. Well, I would like to see Thomas Massey clean John Kerry's clock anytime, but if it was during my news hiatus, I missed it. Well, in any case, I did miss it. So I'm going to say goodbye now because Samson obviously needs some attention right now. But thanks so much for joining me. It was so fun to do this. I don't think this is going to go in my audio feed. My producer's on vacation and I don't know how to do it. So this was just for us, just for fun. I'm just trying to, get back in the swing of things, reading the newspaper, and it was almost unbearable without a goal of sharing it with you. So thanks so much, everyone, for coming, for listening. This has been a not so deep dive, just a news roundup with Monica Perez and all you folks.